साथ प्रभु तेरो मेरो जन्म जन्म का साथ। सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Does anyone have any general question? Okay, so then let us continue. Considering how many questions were there yesterday, it's surprising that nobody has any question today. Which just shows how impulsive our questions tend to be. Because you have them at that moment, it's there and then it's gone. So this is not a disciplined way of questioning anything. So let us see now the Atma. Sorry?
I had a question. I was trying to type, but I think I'll say it out. We have learned that the law that the gross cannot affect the subtle, and my confusion is how does one define of being affected or does not affect, or what is affect? Because we are told that we are inherently divine, so divinity is covered by the gross, which is the vasanas. So how does one then claim that the gross does not affect the subtle?
Affect means to influence in some way. to influence the nature of that thing, the nature or its condition in some way. So it is not possible for a gross thing to influence a subtle thing. For instance, suppose you are put behind bars. So the bars, the iron cage, can hold your body, but it cannot hold your mind. Your mind is free to go anywhere. So mind can think whatever it wants, right? You can stop up, you can tie up somebody's mouth and not let them speak, but you can't stop them from thinking, because you need to stop them from thinking that, you will need something subtler. Like education, for instance. And education can make you stop thinking a certain type of thought, but a jail or tying up your mouth cannot make you stop thinking that thought. So to influence something, to affect something, means to put some kind of any kind of effect on that. There's no effect on that. Now you're taking the example of the vasanas clouding the self. This is not clouding the self. The self has not been influenced or affected or effect. There's no effect on the self because of your vasanas. The self continues to be what it is. No effect has taken place on the self because of the vasanas. But you can argue and say, but the self is hidden to my vision because of the vasana. So that is explained by another example. Nothing that happens on earth can influence the sun. Correct? Nothing that we can do on earth over here can affect the sun. Nothing that goes on here affects the sun in any way. However, when there are clouds, the sun is not there to our vision. So like the sun, like the clouds, can temporarily affect our understanding of the presence of the sun, the clouds cannot affect the sun in any way. Forget clouds. Even if you put like a little finger in front of your eyes, you will not be able to see the sun. But that doesn't mean your finger has affected the sun. Is that clear?
Yes, and this rule applies also to the physical world. For example, a whole glass of milk, and you put one drop of lime, the entire milk is affected. So is the drop of lime more subtler than the glass of milk?
No, of course not. It is the same thing, no? They're both liquids, the same thing. They can affect each other. Same things can affect each other. Why not? Physical things can affect physical things. One important thing, though nobody ever asked this question, one important question which should be asked is, what makes something subtler or grosser than another thing? How do you know that something is subtler or something is grosser? What is a yardstick to know that? So we have discussed it often in class. Does anybody remember?
Mind controls the body and intellect controls the mind. So is that a parameter?
No, of course not. What is the yardstick?
Weights and controls.
Correct. Very good.
The senses like space, then it is Ikendriya, 2 Indriya, 3 Indriya, like that.
I couldn't hear what you're saying, but we are discussing a yardstick, not an example. So I heard you say the word senses and I heard you say the word space, but that won't come into the yardsticks. Yardsticks, Bharat will tell us. Go ahead, Bharat.
Something that pervades and controls. That is the subtler thing.
Very good. So how do you know whether something is subtler? It must have two characteristics. What are those two characteristics? Anything subtler has to pervade the gross. So wherever the gross is, the subtler is there. But two, it not only pervades it, it also controls it. So these are the two characteristics that make something subtle. Like, in Vedanta, things that you seem unanswerable, sometimes there is an answer. How do you know something is subtler? How do you know that classical music, for instance, is subtler than popular music? How would you know? Because what does classical music contain? It contains everything that is possible in pop music can be contained in classical music. In other words, if you're a Bhimsen Joshi, can you not sing a Michael Jackson song? On the other hand, can Michael Jackson sing a Bhimsen Joshi song? So the subtler pervades the gross. A 10 standard student knows what a first standard student knows. His knowledge will pervade. The first standard student cannot know what the 10 standard student knows. So the first quality of something being subtler means it will pervade the gross. So if you say, I care for my country, it will pervade the fact that you care for your state, you care for your community, you care for your family. It will pervade all of this. You can't say, I love my country, but I can't stand my family. Then that doesn't work. How does that work? So anything that is pervasive, identification with the country pervades identification with the state. Because if you identify with your country, obviously you will identify with the state. Or with your state in the sense, your like Maharashtra, Gujarat, like that. Now, suppose you identify with humanity, all humanity. Then you will identify with your country, you will identify with your state, you will identify with your community, the whole thing is included. So subtler means it pervades, and subtler means it is also controls. So the prime minister of the country or any leader who pervades the country will control the actions of the states as well. Your intellect will pervade your mind, meaning what? Wherever your mind goes, your intellect can go. Intellect can think of anything that the mind thinks of, right? But the mind cannot think of anything the intellect thinks of, number one. Number two, the intellect can control the mind. The mind cannot control the intellect. So the two qualities of subtlety are pervasiveness and control.
I had a question.
Yeah, Deepak?
So the mind comprises of those thoughts that are our likes and dislikes. Can the intellect also perform that function?
It is not performing a function. You can't say, can the intellect see? The intellect doesn't have eyes to see. It's not about the function. It pervades that. It controls that. So the intellect is aware of your likes and dislikes and knows what to do with them.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am, I have a question. Can I ask now or at the end of the class?
General question now.
Not a general, it's a subject. Since we're studying God, I wanted to ask regarding that. So,
okay.
At end would be better, or shall I ask?
No, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. So I've been thinking about this for a while because last week's Bhagavad Gita, that verse, that sages, no one can know my source. So we have understood man minus desires is God. But then that is coming from a place of intellect, or that is told by someone. Now, intellect cannot come up with this definition, and that cannot reach the self. So there is no way to reach the self. That is what is being told. At the same time, we are given a lot of formulas that we have to remove our desires. We need to have a higher ideal. and after that higher ideal, you need to this thing. So this is so very contradictory with the subject of Vedanta. Otherwise, it is very clear. Only this part with regard to the self, where it says that you just cannot reach the self. Your BMI cannot reach it. At the same time, there is a formula that man minus desire. So I'm very confused as to how is self reachable, not reachable. I'm very confused with that.
Ganesh, this is like calling a dog mad and killing it. Were you there in the how do you know what you know class? Huh?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
No. Mm.
I wish everybody came to such class. I wish everybody got the basics right. Firstly, you have to listen carefully. Okay, let's get our basics correct. What is the basic? The basic is that the body, mind, and intellect cannot perceive, feel, or know the self. There is no statement that says that the body, mind, and intellect cannot reach the self. Where did that come from? To be able to perceive something is different from being able to reach it. If you don't use your body, mind, intellect to reach the self, with what will you go there? You have nothing else. You only possess a body, mind, intellect. So the body, mind, and intellect cannot be used to perceive, feel, or define the self. You cannot comprehend the self with the intellect. You cannot feel the self with the mind. You cannot perceive it with your sense organs. Okay? This is different from your body, mind, intellect cannot take you to the self. Of course, it can take you to the self. Why can't it take you? What is Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga? When you use your body to reach the self, it's called Karma Yoga. When you use your mind to reach the self, it's called Bhakti Yoga. When you use your intellect to reach the self, it's called Jnana Yoga.
Okay.
Now you see the importance. I love to give this little lecture. You all have heard it and you will hear it ad infinitum. That please be very careful in philosophy. You cannot move a single word. It's like math. You just move some word and the whole thing will go out of the window. Your focus has to be so sharp to study philosophy. One thing you need to move. One piece in that puzzle you move, the whole thing will go. And people think they will do it as a hobby course. You can't do philosophy as a hobby course. You need extremely sharp.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. Only this is confusing me, but it's so very clear that no one has understood the self. Sages don't know my origin. And yes, last week you also told that self-realized people do not know the origin. They may be self-realized. So this is such a distant dream, or I will not say dream, this is just a distant goal, that us providing a solution like man minus desires or Bhakti Yoga, I find it so difficult to comprehend, ma'am, because it's the self. On one hand, it says that you just cannot reach it, right? That's what all the. I don't know.
I say you cannot reach it. You cannot understand it is different from you cannot reach it. Please write everything down, Ganesh, and make sure you're getting the fundamentals correct.
Okay.
Now, that's why we have a Vedanta Foundation course. That is why we have how do you know what you know. We should make these all like prerequisite, right? You can't do anything until you do that much. You know, in traditional Indian society, in traditional Indian knowledge, they wouldn't let you learn Vedanta until you have learned Nyaya. There's so many things you have to learn before. You have to know how to do rituals before you learn Vedanta. But what is rituals to do with Vedanta? You have to know that. You have to know logic. You have to know, they listed out a whole bunch of things you got to know before you can learn Vedanta. So that by the time they came to the study of Vedanta, they were like totally clued in. Now it's very tough for us, I think, because we jump straight into Vedanta, like you jump straight into PhD. So it is a struggle for everyone. And obviously that is seen. Priya how to sharpen our focus. Don't look so sad, Priya. There's nothing sad about it. If you sharpen your focus 10% in life, your life will improve. I don't know how many times over. So there's nothing sad. It's very good if you could focus. It's like it's like a camera getting sharper and sharper and sharper. Can you imagine if you have that kind of vision, just so sharp? Much more we will achieve in life. Yes, write things down is a good way of doing it. Write it down. Pay attention is the first way. Like for instance, today we discussed what makes something subtle. After a couple of months, the same group will ask a question pertaining to that, which will imply that the first 2 points have not been understood. A good question is when you understood the concept and then you ask a question. Those are great questions because those are real questions. And when I hope one day we as a group will come to those type of questions, you understood it and now you're questioning it. Imagine if we come to that. We'll change the world. 53 of us will change the world if we are able to do that.
Janki ji, may I come back again to the bliss sheath, which was yesterday we were talking. So the bliss sheath is the one which is closest to the self, and that is the seat of deep sleep, vasana, and ignorance.
That is not the seat of. That is synonymous terms.
Okay, it is ignorance, vasana, deep sleep. So if the self is here, bliss sheath is closest to it. So they are two opposites actually. I mean, I don't understand how, because we've always been told knowledge and ignorance are different steps on the ladder, different rungs. So if knowledge is at number 8 and ignorance at 0 or 1, that is the gap. But self is here and here now ignorance is reached very close. I mean, it is very close to the self. Whole night I was thinking of this. Every time I woke up, I was like, how is this possible?
Okay, I would like you to please go back to reading. Whenever you have these kind of problems, go back and read what it says. Okay, so let us read it. What you just said and what Vedanta has told you are two completely different.
My understanding.
Let's read it. Page 1. No. I mean, I don't mean to, sort of say you guys are not studying. It's not like that. The knowledge is like that. It's what sounds all the same to us is actually very different.
Yeah.
That is why in philosophy, nobody can tell between a person who knows the philosophy and a person who's generalizing. One person came to class and he went on repeating the same thing over and over again. He doesn't know that he has no specific knowledge. It's just one idea which he repeats over and over again. So it's not your fault. And certainly when I tell you that things like this, it's certainly not to make you feel bad about it. It is the nature of the knowledge itself that you have to struggle to get it. You can't get this free. Sorry, it just can't be done. You have to struggle. And part of the struggle is just paying attention to what we were told. So in my book, it's on page 106. I don't know what it is in yours. Omkar, I don't have that book, so I don't know. In this book, it is 106. Omkar, can you put that on screen or you can't do that right now?
No, I'll look it up. 1 second. 106.
Do you have this one? It's 106. Or don't worry, let me just read what it says. I'll read what it says. Knowledge and ignorance. Okay, or you can in your books look it up in the chapter on knowledge. What is it? Light of Wisdom, chapter 7. Veil of Ignorance is the topic. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth paragraph which is on the second page of Light of Wisdom. Light of Wisdom?
It's page 129. Page 129, Janki.
Page 129. Okay. So if you all found it, I'm reading it. Knowledge and ignorance differ in degree, not in kind. The higher rung of the ladder is knowledge, while the lower is ignorance. The higher rung, there is no 0, which is knowledge, and 100, which is ignorance. 1 is ignorance, 2 is knowledge. 2 is knowledge, 2 is ignorance, 3 is knowledge. 3 is ignorance, 4 is knowledge. That's what it means, but it is relative. It is a comparative thing. These are relative terms like light and darkness. Light and darkness are also different in degree, not in kind. The electric light is bright compared to the dullness of candlelight. The same electric light becomes dull apropos the brilliance of sunlight. So what at one stage is knowledge, for another stage is ignorance. What for one person is ignorance is for another person knowledge. Right? Now, absolute knowledge is the self. Reduction of vasanas is relative knowledge or ignorance. The fewer the vasanas, the more the knowledge. The greater the vasanas, the less the knowledge. So if you really think about it, Vedantic knowledge is nothing but spiritual growth. Because if you don't get spiritual growth, you won't get Vedantic knowledge. The opposite is also true. If you don't get Vedantic knowledge, you're unlikely to get spiritual growth. Both ways. But that's very, that could be very misunderstood if you don't understand it properly. So let's remove the second sentence that if you don't get Vedantic knowledge, spiritual growth is not possible. Of course it is. You can do it through any knowledge. But Vedanta scores, at least for us, is because it's so systematic. With Zen, with Sufi, with, so many different ways you have of learning the same thing. And they're very beautiful to hear. But sometimes the knowledge eludes us over there. It eludes us here also. But here we have, it's somehow made more concrete. And Zen and Sufi and, all religious books tell us the same thing, but it's made more abstract. So sometimes we can't reach that understanding. We misunderstand. Very unfortunate. So, Tinky, are you clear? Knowledge and ignorance are relative, means the same point is knowledge for one and ignorance for another. Just like, is candlelight light? It is compared to darkness, but not compared to the sun. Okay? Okay, Deep Raj, one way to focus might be figuring out how your current activity fits into your bigger goal. Yes, that is one way. There are multiple ways like that. This is always a good way to know what you're doing and how it connects to your big goal. But the crux of developing your focus is really developing your intellect. The stronger the intellect, the stronger the focus. It's that simple. Right? So now let's go. Which page were we on? We were studying the composite personality. Isn't that right? And where were we? We were at how does the... Sorry?
It's on screen, the paragraph.
Yes, thank you. That was a rhetorical question, actually. Now I remember. How is it that this pure consciousness functioning through the body, mind, intellect brings about such a convoluted personality? How? Where is that state of that divine? And where is the way we are behaving? How does it become so convoluted? What happened in this journey? I mean, even today our situations are so bad that if you just meet a person who doesn't have an agenda, you feel like a breath of fresh air. Isn't it? Everybody has an agenda. the way they say things and what they say, and you want to prove a point and you want to prove you're superior or you want to prove somebody is wrong about something. Even in a normal conversation, and especially in Indian families, the way they will put things is to establish a point. It's crazy stuff. Even in offices, everywhere, it's like nobody can just be a plain blunt man. Be straight. What is it you want? What is it you appreciate? What do you want? And be straight about it. So where did we go? I mean, like from divinity, we came to this convoluted state. Let's say somebody goes out for a party and they have a good time at the party. And then they come home. And what do you say to them? So you must have had a good time at a party. Like, what is that even supposed to mean? Why shouldn't that person have a good time at the party? Like, isn't it good if somebody enjoyed themselves? What's so bad in that? Somebody spends some money. What's there in that? You are the Raja Bhoj ke putra. But why do you have to say all these things? Somebody bought something and he or she is happy with whatever they have bought. So, mera kya ja raha hai? So convoluted, so convoluted. Why is it so convoluted? Because our own desires are not available to us. We confuse and perplex the situation to such a point, we no longer know ourselves. What is good and what is bad, what I want and what I don't want. What confusion. And how did all this come about? How did we get so convoluted? Why is it so difficult for us to have the easy, smooth flowing behavior of a child? Why is that so tough for us? Isn't that interesting? Why is it so convoluted? So how did it happen? How does it get so convoluted? Tell me. If you know the answer, you have to tell me in 2 words.
Unintelligent identification.
Excellent, Bharat. I hope you all knew that too. Unintelligent identification. You will identify with things. Okay, that is all right also. But why unintelligent identification? What is unintelligent identification? It basically means that when you are identifying, intellect is not applied at all. At all. The same thing done by X person is good, usually myself. The exact same thing done by Y person, usually somebody I'm irritated with, is bad. Same thing. So if I go out to a restaurant and eat, that's good. And if you go to a restaurant and eat, that's bad. How does that work? Isn't it amazing? Why do I not even know, is it good or bad to go to a restaurant and eat? And if I think it is good, then it should be, everybody should be able to go. And if I think it is bad, then it should apply to me as well. Convoluted lifestyle because of a non-application of intellect at all. Zero. Say, how do I know my intellect is not applied? Check how much convolution is there. I mean, at least forget ourselves, but can you see it in others when they talk like that? They talk with an agenda, always with an agenda. If you can at least see it in others, well, you can stop it in yourself at least. You can't stop the whole world from doing whatever they are doing. If you can see them do it, you will see how much confusion there is in their life. And from that, maybe we can see how much we are capable of messing up our own life. So this unintelligent identification, where you identify with things without thinking about them at all. You identify with your emotions without thinking of them at all. You identify with your concepts without thinking of them at all. You identify with your sorrow without thinking of it at all. Identify with pain in your body without thinking of it at all. Means any sensible application of thought. So we are all unhealthy, we are suffering with pain, but there's no application. You say, oh, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. Or I'm in sorrow. But there's no sensible application. So I'm in sorrow, you people are bad to me, this, that, and the other. And our concepts, God alone help us. What all concepts we have come up with. So, unintelligent identification is the bane of our existence, where you allow thoughts to flow without any kind of intellectual supervision. Now, what does the word identification mean? When you say you identify with something, means what? Identification means that simply means that you think about it. Your thoughts go in that direction. So now, can you stop thinking about it? Of course not. Then what are you supposed to do? Think about it with discrimination, with the intellect. Not the mind is gone. Chalo, ek chakkar ke liye jaake aate hain. Not like that. But you have applied yourself consciously. Many people ask this question, how do I know whether my intellect has been applied or not? And the simple answer to that always is, where's the work? Did you put in that work? Because if you put in the work, you will definitely know that you did it. Suppose you're trying to figure out whether this investment is better than this investment. There's X investment and Y investment. So you want to decide which of these two investments are better. So did you apply your intellect? You chose one. So did you apply your intellect? How will you know? Did you sit down and work out the math? If you sat down and worked out the math, then you know which is better. If you say, no, I like this one more, then you know you didn't apply your intellect. So how do I know I applied my intellect? Means I sat down and I put in some work on this matter. I didn't just come up with some decision. I worked it out. So if you have worked it out, how can you not know? When you know. So there's no working out. Know that it is unintelligent identity. Now what to do? Sometimes I'm too tired to work anything out. My intellect is exhausted. So he gave us a simpler method. What is the simpler method? What happened? This is a summary of last time. All this is the teacher's failure, okay? Not a single student in the class knows what the point is.
Yogas.
Follow the
yogas.
Follow the three paths.
Very good. Thank you. Otherwise, I will only go into depression. So, follow the three paths with your body. So, with your mind, cultivate love and devotion. With your intellect, discriminate between what is real and what is not real, what is important, what is not important. Do some serious discrimination. So these are the three paths: Karma Yoga, Yoga, Jnana Yoga. And when you do this, your unintelligent identification will reduce naturally, because now you're doing intelligent one. So that your thoughts, which were going all over the place in all this crazy mess, like a fly buzzing, you know, all that nonsense will soon shant. It will on its own, you don't have to wait, on its own. But do the three. That's why Jnana Yoga we try, Karma Yoga we try, And Bhakti Yoga we try. At least before the class we put on some bhajans. So I hope you at least listen to them. But I notice most people don't arrive in the class until the class has started. So Bhakti seems to be out. 5-10 minutes before class starts, once we come in and sit down quietly and listen to some devotional music. Why is that so tough? So when you do these three things, serious interest. Basically, is there any serious interest in Vedanta? Or is it just a feel-good thing? There is some serious interest, then do some serious work. And then what will happen is you reach the state of understanding the truth. Nothing very spectacular, I suppose, should be so obvious of the truth. How can we miss the truth? Because that is the one thing that is clearly there. So find out what is really true. This idea is portrayed in the Mahabharata. Omkar, that's the next paragraph. Who's gonna read it?
I will.
Please do.
The idea is portrayed in the picture of the chariot and the horses in the epic Mahabharata, with Krishna as the charioteer and Arjuna seated behind. When the charioteer holds the reins firmly, the horses are under control. The chariot heads to its destination. If the charioteer is not alert, the reins slacken. The horse go out of control. The passenger fails to reach his destination. In the metaphor, the charioteer represents the intellect, the reins the mind, the horses the senses, the passenger the individual. When the intellect maintains a perfect control over the mind and the senses, the individual reaches the ultimate goal. So Krishna, the charioteer, represents intellect, holds the reins firmly. The reins represent the mind and controls the horses, the horses represent the senses, and the chariot heads to the destination in the Mahabharata. The goal is reached when the intellect has control over the mind and the senses of the individual.
Very good. Simple thing. Your charioteer, is it driving the chariot or other horses driving the chariot? Whatever you see and you say, oh, I want that and I want that. And the chariot is going helter-skelter because the nose wants something and the mouth wants something and the eyes want something and the ears want something and all these horses are going helter-skelter. They rip the chariot apart. And that's our life, ripped apart. Why? Because the reins are slack. Why? Because the charioteer is not holding them tight. Then what destination, what goal, what end? Therefore, first learn to hold those reins tight. Therefore, first you have to have a goal. And then how are you going to hold it tight? And then if you have a higher goal, then you'll go to a much better destination. Is that clear? Okay, only one question you may have in this whole thing is, why does he refer to the senses? Why doesn't? Because he's talking about unintelligent identification. What is unintelligent identification? Your mind is functioning without your intellect. Your thoughts are flowing, but no discrimination is working, right? Why sense? It's an interesting idea always that your mind is basically following your senses everywhere. So why are you thinking whatever you're thinking is because that is what you're seeing or hearing or tasting or touching or smelling. So the senses begin to drive everything. You see something and you're driven in that direction. Your mind is slack, so it's going with whatever the senses saw. Or you hear something. In the class, remember, in How Do You Know What You Know, we discussed this in the form of an availability heuristic. You happen to see something, your mind has gone over there. Now everything, mind is gone there, intellect is gone there, total chaos. Just because of availability. It's available. You just heard it, or saw it, or smelled it, or tasted it. And now, chalo, whole journey is taken off. I mean, just think about this as an example, because one really doesn't know what happened. Here is a man, the eldest son of the King of England. He is going to inherit the throne, and he has been trained. Everyone knows he's going to inherit the throne. So from early childhood, he has been trained. He has been, like, everything in his life has been around getting the throne. He's the next king. Then as I see somebody, and the reins are slack, with the eyes, mind is also gone. And what happens after that? He abdicates the throne. He forgets, no? Forgets what he was there to do. What was the point of his existence at that point? All forgotten, all gone. Now, I'm not suggesting he shouldn't abdicate the throne. Certainly not. If he found somebody and he thought that was more important than his throne, that's his personal choice, and none of us have a right to say anything about it. But was it? That's the question. Is this really his conscious choice? If it is his conscious choice, then good for him, because he did the right. But if it was driven by the sense, then sad for him, because he will regret it horribly. One boy felt that he was very badly treated by his parents, who gave, according to him, a large part of the inheritance to the daughter. So he was very, whatever, there are a lot of family politics, and the thing is that he was under the impression that his sister was given precedence over him. So he had a lot of bitterness and anger towards his parents. Very, very, very angry. And the sister, of course, I mean, naturally the parents were more with the sister because of all this. And the sister was looking after them. And then later on, the mother passed away. And he refused to go to the funeral. Now, this is an interesting thing. He said, no, I'm too busy. I can't come. I have all my commitments right now. Mother's funeral. Now, think about this thing. What is driving this decision? Is it a conscious application and deciding that this is really the right thing for him to do? Or is it driven by something else? Frightening, no? If you take a decision like that and you don't go, and let us say 20 years later you regret it, what will you do then? What will you do? Will you die with guilt? What will you do? Because later on, this is the kind of action you either did it or you didn't. So what will you do then later on if you regret? If you don't regret it, fine, you're good. If you do regret it, what are you going to do? So be careful. We must all be careful to make sure that our decisions are conscious decisions. We chose it. And if it is my conscious decision, then everybody else get out of the way. Nobody else has a right to say it. But mostly, it doesn't happen like that. That chariot is driven helter-skelter. And that's how most people's lives are, no? All our lives are like that. Helter-skelter. Aaj ye dikha, aaj wo dikha, Arjuna's feeling. Okay, clear. Shall we continue? Personality layer.
Gandhiji, I have a question here.
Yeah, okay.
In this analogy, Krishna represents the intellect, and Arjuna is the person. So I mean, when you say the person is the questioner to the intellect, who is this person?
The individual. This is the Bhagavad Gita has actually adopted this idea from the Kathopanishad, which gives this analogy. So it is usually used as a, because we have such an ancient tradition, there is a place from where all this is coming. So the Kathopanishad gives this analogy. And then the Bhagavad Gita was sort of adapted it, the Mahabharata adapted it into showing that the intellect in that is Krishna. So it's coming from sort of a backstory here. So in the Kathopanishad, the horses are the mind, horses are the senses, reins are the mind, intellect is the charioteer, and the person who's sitting there is the individual. So the individual reaps, as it were, the good and bad fruits. So basically, when the results come, it is Janki who is affected, right? The whole composite personality. You don't say only this is affected. The whole composite personality is affected.
So in our earlier lessons, we learned that when that the fact that we say my body, my mind, my intellect, the my is different from the BMI, and that my essentially is the divine self, right? Then in this example,
yes and no. Yes and no. The I is the ego, and the I is the self. When the self identifies with the BMI, that I becomes the ego. There is no difference. When that identification takes place, that I becomes the small I. And before identification takes place, that I is the big I, the self.
So only in this example we refer to Krishna as the intellect. Otherwise, Krishna would be the self, right?
Yeah, I mean the nature of poetry and art is it depends on context always. That's what I'm saying. This is an adaptation from what was Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi Shariram Rathamevacha. That is Kathopanishad. Buddhi tu Saratham. The Buddhi is the Sarathi. So basically, it is sort of an adopted simile because, Krishna is known as the Sarathi, right? So it is sort of linked like that. So don't take it in any other. Understand that there is this tradition that backs it. So if you were in the tradition, which we are not anymore, but had we been in the tradition, it would be an automatic, what should I say? Because the words are buddhi tu sarathi. So it is, and then Krishna is referred to as Parthasarathi, the Sarathi of Parath. So here it is spoken of like that, and this is the nature of poetry, and we're going to study it in chapter 4. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, here you take it as it. It's sounding silly to you because at the moment you are saying, oh, there you took it as self, and here you're taking it as buddhi. For someone in the tradition, it is a very easy linkage. I don't know how to explain that. You know, now many things today are sort of obvious to us, which in future will not be. For instance, if I say the lockdown created a lot of interest in Vedanta, suppose I say that. Now you will know exactly what I mean. But 50 years later, people will say, why would a lockdown create interest in Vedanta? They don't understand you. What are you saying? What lockdown? What was lockdown? And why would any lockdown in any case create an interest in Vedanta? You see what I mean? That when you are in that context, you understand what that thing means. But when you're not in the context, you don't get it. So it seems a bit odd. So that's why I'm telling you the context. Buddhi Sarathim.
Janki Sahu here. What represents the body in this metaphorical portrayal?
Sorry, what happens to the body? What?
No, what represents the body? The mind and intellect have been represented. So
the horses. Horses.
Okay, the senses.
Yeah. Senses is the body.
Right. Thank you.
Janki ji?
Yeah.
Then where is the self in this chariot metaphor, or is it not? Is it omitted just?
No, it's not represented here. The ego. How do I say this? The ego and the self are really the same thing, right? It is your it is you, the person. Like if I say, who are you? When you answer that by saying, I am Srinivasan who lives in Chennai, blah, 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 whatever it is, then that's the ego. But when you answer that by saying, or not saying, but by knowing that I am the all-pervading reality, then that is the self. So there's really no difference between the ego and the self. It's the same thing. When the self is, as it were, passing through the body, mind, intellect, that thing is called ego. That thing is called Srinivasan, Janki, Usha, Shilpa, Naim. It's called that. But when you disassociate it from it, the original thing is the self. So the individual includes the self. I mean, it means the self.
Very clear, Janki. Thanks.
Okay. Personality layers. This is all revision, no, of foundation course. Who will read next one?
Shall I read, Janki ji?
Yes, please do.
Personality layers. The human being is composed of 5.
There is some issue with the display. Just let me fix it. Mr. Srivasan, you have the book?
Yeah, I can read. The human being is composed of 5 material layers with the self, Atman, at the core. The diagram below represents this structural division. The mystic symbol Om, pronounced Om, at the center is Atman. The 5 circles, the 5 layers of matter are known as Panchakoshas. The outermost circle is the food sheath, Annamaya Kosha. Within it is the vital air sheath, Pranamaya Kosha. Next, the mental sheath, Manomaya Kosha, and intellectual sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha. The innermost is the bliss sheath, Anandamaya Kosha. To sum up, Another way of the human composition is the personality layers, which is represented by 5 material layers with the self, Atman at the core. The 5 sheets are Annamaya, food sheet, Pranamaya, vital air sheet, Manomaya, mental sheet, Vijnanamaya, intellectual. The innermost is the bliss and Anandamaya question.
Okay, good. So this is actually from Taittiriya Upanishad, which comes in the Shukla Yajurveda. We're hearing a lot of backstory today. This is the sheets are explained there. Now, Omkar, next time, can you please put a triangle? Can you take this image and put a triangle on it?
On the okay.
Yes.
On the
Yeah. From the Om to Anandmaya Kosha, like put a triangle as if you're, sort of cutting out a slice of a cake. And then we will understand. The reason to do that is to understand its association with the other sheets, with the other classifications.
So the triangle goes from where?
From Om right down, all of it, like as if it was a cake and you cut out a little slice from the center. From Om, like that down.
Okay.
Got it? And so that we will use to explain how it matches with the body, mind, intellect classification we have used so far. Also, please remind me that we have to do that. So, as of now, you all know that there are 5 sheets. The outermost is Annamaya, and then it goes within, right up to the bliss sheet. Okay, so we'll continue next time. Hari Om.
Thank you, Jan.